The terrorist organization Hamas is stepping up its attacks on Israel. Hamas vows to crush Israel and says it has thousands of fighters committed to destroy the nation.
Israel has been under constant rocket attack from Gaza for 8 years.
This is a critical time in the Middle East and a critical time for Israel. As Israel continues to defend itself from the terrorist actions of Hamas, the American Center for Law and Justice is standing with Israel during this troubling time. And the ACLJ wants you to stand with Israel too. Send a powerful message of support to Israel. Sign on to the ACLJ Proclamation for Solidarity, showing your support for Israel. Call now, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. The Proclamation for Solidarity with Israel, or you can add your name online at ACLJ.org. Israel is our friend. Israel is our ally. Please stand with Israel right now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the broadcast. In just one moment, we're going to be joined by Nir Nitzan, a very good friend. If you've been watching our TV broadcast this last month, you've seen Nir on often from Israel. We'll get some perspective from him. He's also handled all of our students this year, gave a tremendous tour of Israel to our students from Regent University. He's a good friend and someone that we've worked with over the years. We'll get to him in just 30 seconds. Let me encourage you before we do that, folks, every one of you that are listening, at least write this number down and then call it. I need you to sign this petition, a proclamation of solidarity for Israel, because I got to get the UN, our team up there, to back off on this national security resolution, which would only name Israel as engaging in hostile acts and not even mention Hamas, which sounds absurd, but it's exactly what's going on right now. We also have a Special Operations Unit team in Israel right now as well. So a lot going on. Here's the phone number, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 to stand with Israel. Let me bring Nir Nitzan into the conversation right now. Nir is, as I said, led our tours. He's a very, very well-respected member in the reserves of the Israeli Defense Forces, a lieutenant colonel. Nir, the first time you and I worked together, it was as the Second Lebanon War was breaking out. We now have this latest war. You and I were talking by email while I was in Israel. You were with a group. Your son is defending your country. What's the sense, what's the assessment right now of what's happening on the ground, and what's the attitude within Israel right now?
Well, the attitude is that we need to keep it going. The attitude is that Israel is standing in the front line of not just our war of independence, but world war with the Islamic fundamentalists, and we are just the front line. If we allow these Islamic fundamentalists to keep on rising, who knows who's next? But we are just the front line of this.
You know, we're saying that this is a proxy war for Iran. Jordan, that was one of the things we saw clearly when we were there. Jordan, you had a time that, and some of the time you were out, you spoke with some of the younger people in Israel, people that were your age, some that were with us that were having their units actually called up. What was your assessment from them? And these are people that are your age, 26, 27 years old.
That's right. It seems like the clear assessment coming out of Israel, and of course it's been reported back in the news, some here in the U.S., though, not as clearly, is that those rockets that are fired on the towns that you're going to see in our television broadcast that you've seen on the news, though I don't think it's been covered enough on the news here in the U.S. when these rockets hit. There were two today that went through a school in Israel. Luckily, those schools have been canceled in those cities, so there were not students there. But that's where they're targeted at. Again, they're targeted civilian populations, civilian areas, and most of the time children. Is where these rockets do the most damage. But let me tell you this, everyone knows these rockets come from Iran. The technology behind the rockets, which is not really technology, but the ability to make them comes from Iran. The underground bunker system in Gaza was built by Iran. So just like our U.S. forces are fighting Iranian insurgents in Iraq, these Hamas fighters and the weapons they use are trained, again, this is the same training by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Nir. Your town, which is not too far from here, you emailed me yesterday, you're experiencing rocket fire as well, which is one of the things that it's so hard to imagine that even as the UN is debating this, that this issue will not come up, that Hamas is launching rockets at civilians.
Yes, rockets are coming as far as 2 miles away from my house. My wife and little kids, little girls are hiding in the shelter every time it comes. I'll give you a story I just heard from a woman in Sderot. I went down to the Gaza Strip last night to see my son. A woman was talking about her kids. She said she got 4 little kids. She put them in a car to drive them somewhere. She buckled them up, and then she got a warning. She got 15 seconds. What does she do? Which kid she take first? Where does she go? And this is the kind of life she lives for the last 8 years. Again, with technology that comes from Iran, with support that the entire Arab world tend to support, either loud or quiet, but it's all supported. And the UN sit by in silence and forget that it's coming from here. At the same time, I heard a story from a dear friend of mine whose son is a pilot of F-16, who said that he got up in the air, he got his target, and he was told not to release the bombs. There's a civilian on the target. He flew up there for an hour, and after an hour, he threw the bombs in the water, just because there were civilians on target. Who else behaved like this?
Well, certainly not Hamas, that's for sure. And, folks, what I'm hoping you're hearing from the tone of Nir's comments here, the reality what the people are living in the ground. Jordan and I experienced this 14-second run to a bunker, and I'll tell you something. Jordan, in fact, was in a car when the first one came, and had to get out and get to a bunker in 14 seconds. This is the life they've led in Israeli territory. This is undisputed Israeli territory, and Hamas lobbing these rockets in, and now you've got the UN threatening to issue a national security resolution condemning Israel and not even mentioning Hamas. Now, folks, I need every one of you that are listening right now to go to your phones, every single one of you to go to your phones right now and add your name to this proclamation of solidarity to Israel, and let us work on this UN situation right now. Here's the number. Call it right now. It is critical that we hear from all of you. 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. You can also sign up online at ACLJ.org. Let's go to our phones. Jordan, who do we have?
Let's go right to the phones. Lots of calls coming in. 1-800-684-3110. Alan's calling from Nevada online, too. Alan, welcome to JSEC-Yo Live.
Hi, Alan.
Hi, Jay. I have a two-part question.
Sure.
One is, how many times has a nation attacked Israel and not been condemned by the United Nations? And how many times has Israel been condemned by the United Nations for defending themselves?
Well, every time Israel defends itself, it is, in recent history, at least since 1967, has been, the UN, let's face it, they said Zionism is racism. That came out of the United Nations. The action right now that's going on with the National Security Council is the same attempt. So the UN has been very, very negative, and yet it's the United Nations. So Israel's using its diplomatic sources. And let me throw this question to Nir, because it's a very good question that Alan asked. What impact do you, and I know that the Israeli citizens are very disturbed by the UN action, especially since it's so I'll say it, Hamas and the terrorists at this point, and so negative on Israel. What impact does that, Nir, have on the citizens of Israel, if any?
Jay, this is such a hypocrisy of the UN. There's so much to it. We're dealing with a culture that has no value whatsoever to human life. The commanders and the leaders of Hamas are hiding in a hospital in the bottom floor because they know we will not attack them. That's the culture we're fighting with. We're fighting a culture who is shooting civilian targets only.
Yeah, this is, folks, you're hearing this in Nir's voice. He's coming to us from Israel right now. We've got a whole team still deployed there and a team now working the UN angle on this as well. Folks, I got to have your support here. Jordan, give everyone the number, because we were there. We saw this firsthand. We can't let the UN get away with this. We've got to have a proclamation of solidarity with Israel and be unapologetic in it, especially as the UN's considering these national security resolutions. By the way, the Arab foreign minister's meeting this afternoon. Mahmoud Abbas coming to New York tomorrow.